Hey gang, Volty here. Now we're doing another post-match commentary, and this is of the top 8 of Plenty of Games Winner Library event last Sunday. In first in Swiss we had Cody, in 8th came in Riley. So on the left we have Cody on Gorgeous Reanimator, who will have the play, and on the right we have Riley on Lutri Grixis with the draw. This is a really interesting matchup because Riley has access to quite a lot of graveyard hate in the main deck. So Deathrite Shaman, Deathy Voidwalker are the most notable examples. Sometimes the decks play things like Cling to Dust. So the pressure is really on Cody to navigate the spots that Riley is planning to put him into. Whether he can interact with the graveyard hate pieces and ignore everything else, or if he can use counter magic and disruption to force through a kill. It's also entirely possible. And being on the play is going to give him quite an edge in this game 1. I would say probably about 55, maybe 60% to win game 1. Purely off the back of being on the play and being able to play a turn 1 Thoughtseize on a Deathrite Shaman, which is probably the most common play pattern that leads to an easy kill. Alternatively, if Cody's hand is something like Reanimate plus, Entomb plus double Reanimation spell, that can also check against Riley's turn 1 discard spells, which are entirely possible as well. So, pretty critical here. Both players' opening hands, incredibly important in game 1. Post-board, a little bit different. Riley will have access to more graveyard hate, and Cody will have access to more interaction. Things like Abrupt Decay, maybe a Duress, if it's not already in the main deck. But game 1 is the weird one, where Grixis has enough graveyard hate in the main board for it to be meaningful, and enough stack interaction and hand disruption to actually be able to check the game 1 symptom of Reanimator. But the current builds of Reanimator being, Sultai and having quite a lot of interaction, both on the stack and for the hand, means that we could see a bloodbath in the early turns. Both players might end up with 5 or 4 cards or something. Looks like Cody mulling to 6 and Riley going to keep. I think I saw a misstep, which is probably the single most important card from the Grixis side. Less important on the Reanimator side than you'd expect, but on the Grixis side, misstep on the draw allows you to actually get a bit of tempo against the Reanimator strategy of play big broken spells very, very quickly. Looks like Cody's got a keepable hand here. I see a Dance, Worldly Tutor. I think there's a Dark Red in there. Gonna lead with Verdant Go. Now, notably, Cody has access to Worldly Tutor, put a creature on top, player Surveil land, and put it into the graveyard. It's not a very broken combo by any means, and it's possible he won't go for it, and he'll save the Worldly Tutor for something like Metamorphosis Fanatic, but Riley with essentially the best turn 1 play he has, which is Deathrite Shaman off a green source. If he plays correctly and can protect this Deathrite after it untaps and doesn't die on turn 2, it's pretty hard to lose here. Now obviously Cody does have the ability to kill a Deathrite Shaman, and does have cards like Show and Tell, which go around it, and could also present something meaningful this exact turn when Deathrite is summoning sick. But otherwise I think Riley just leaves the Tropical Island untapped and the Deathrite untapped for the rest of the game, and it's really, really hard to lose. So we'll see what happens here. It looks like there's a snow-covered island and a troll. Probably just going to be Island Go and Swamp Cycle here. Yeah, looks like it. I think Riley identifying that he really doesn't need to do much now. He needs to not let a Show and Tell resolve. He needs to keep his hand relatively stocked with stack interaction. He needs to protect his Deathrite Shaman, and he needs to hold up green mana. But if he does that, at some point he should win the game. With just extra mana and leftover permanents, basically. Cody gonna start off his turn 3 with a... looks like a troll, thinking about a Swamp Cycle here. And this will just be to make a land drop. I doubt he'll bother trying to reanimate the troll. He has a Mystical Tutor in hand. Mystical Tutor does give him access to Show and Tell. Riley, you're going to use the Deathrite to eat a mana and then put Troll in the graveyard and get a Badlands. I think this is fine. It's pretty unlikely that Reanimator can put a creature into play at instant speed. They're not typically playing Shallow Grave these days. It is possible, but it's not common. Going to put a... I'm guessing it's Ledger Shredder? Based off its casting cost? Looks like it's 1 and a blue. I imagine it's Ledger Shredder. MT gonna be put on the stack here. Riley with a decently heads-up play. It's very easy to let the MT resolve. Because so many of the cards that Cody could be getting with MT are 1-drops, but critically, Show and Tell is a 3-drop. Spell Pierce on the misstep is going to resolve, and MT is going to resolve. I imagine this is always getting either Fatal Push for the Deathrite or Show and Tell. I think those are the only realistic options. Or maybe like a Bone Shards or something, but some way to interact with Deathrite or Show and Tell to try to juke it. I think those are the only options. Notably, and I think it was made clear by Cody there, that he cast Mystical Tutor in response to the Ledger Shredder, so that if there was a small counter war and he had to fire off the Spell Pierce to protect the MT, it wouldn't trigger the Shredder. So very heads up. Is going to get Show and Tell, is going to draw it for turn. Now, notably, Cody doesn't have a 3rd land drop. We saw a Troll, but he didn't have time to Swamp Cycle it yet. Gonna Swamp Cycle now. So Show and Tell can happen next turn. Or with something like a Dark Grit, could happen this turn, I suppose. I'm not going to go for it, just going to say go. Riley going to tag the Troll. Looks like he has a Force in hand. A pretty big deal. If he had to hold counter magic up by holding up mana, that would be substantially worse. Cody gonna fire off a Worldly Tutor here. Imagine this is just getting Atraxa. I mean, Cody's going pretty much all in, right? Like, he Mystical Tutored for Show and Tell, and now he's Worldly Tutoring. Just ripping through his own hand and hoping that Riley has kept a soft hand without much counter magic and maybe a couple of removal spells off the back of Deathrite Shaman. Show and Tell, snap on the stack, counterspell, snap countering it. And now Cody's left with an Atraxa in hand. Can't put it into the graveyard because it'll get exiled. I don't think Cody can win this game. Show and Tell's pretty much the only way that Reanimator has to juke Deathrite Shaman. So he needs to find a removal spell for Deathrite Shaman, like a Bone Shards. I think in hindsight, taking this line of really slowly MT for Show and Tell Worldly for a thing to put in with it, I think I would have preferred MT for like a Bone Shards and just try and kill Deathrite that way. Because if Deathrite dies, Riley doesn't have graveyard interaction. And sure, he can play counterspells on your animation spells, but there's only so many counterspells he can have. And once your creature's in the graveyard and there isn't a Deathrite in play, it's pretty safe. Gonna have a Shredder trigger, looks like a Brainstorm. Still holding up green mana. I mean, Riley's hand kind of light, but you've already fired off the Show and Tell. The other option is to MT for Show and Tell and wait until you find more discard spells. Because it's not like Riley's clock was very significant. I mean, he had a Ledger Shredder, and he could every now and then deal you 2 with Deathrite Shaman, and that was it. I think I would have preferred a more passive line. Either MT for a removal spell in Deathrite, Worldly Tutor for Metamorphosis and just cast it as a 4/4. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how you win in this spot anymore. I mean, you've given Grixis so many turns to sculpt a hand to do any amount of, resource building to protect death, right? You've spent your Show and Tell, which is almost certainly the only way he has to duke graveyard hate. Verdant does not get Volcanic Island. Thank you, Riley. Is this like a Pyroglyph? He's spending so much mana. Oh, he's buying Lutri. Yeah, sure. That's fine. And now Cody's hand is 2 reanimation spells, a Traxer, and I don't know what the other card is. Maybe a Misstep? It's something that's like decently irrelevant, I would say. I imagine this is Sanctuary and just pick up Counterspell. Could be pick up AI, but I think you have a clock that you just need to not die. And if you put Counterspell in your hand and you have access to Lutri and you have access to Deathrite, if you hold up this 6 mana and attack for 2 every turn, you can't lose this game. You can only lose this game by doing things. Based off the resources that Cody has spent, including the Show and Tell. Yeah, you just hold up Counterspell Lutri, you hold up green mana death, right? Anytime a creature isn't being threatened to come into play, you tag a spell with death rate and get an extra turn of damage in, and you just say go. And if you do this every turn, you should not lose from Riley's seat. I'm fairly confident Cody doesn't have outs. Gonna play Lutri, I'm guessing, for lethal? Yeah, sure. That's fine. Probably technically a little loose. Almost certainly gets there, like 99.8% of the time. But I think the technically safest play is not to play Lutri and just attack for 2 again. Because Counterspell plus Lutri gives you way too much stack interaction. So I think Cody probably boards 6 cards? 7 cards? It's probably Carpet. It's maybe the 5th discard spell. It's maybe a Force Negation if it's not in the main. Decay is probably going to come in. It's almost certainly going to come in. Maybe a weird sideboard threat if he has access to one. And I think Riley will bring in maybe Rebs. Maybe a Hearse or a Vacuum if he has access to them. And shave on some of the more expensive stuff. Looks like Strix got cut. Maybe Fury. Just gonna bring in, yeah, like a Nihil Spellbomb by the looks of it. Hearse, a Consign, sure. Keeping Fatal Push in, probably as a hedge against Psychic Frog. Not in love with keeping Fatal Push in. I don't know that any of the cards left in Riley's sideboard are meaningful. And you don't really want to be stone cold against a Psychic Frog. And I guess Baleful Strix just doesn't actually do anything. So it's probably fine. Yeah, it's probably fine. It's possible it's also a hedge against something like Baraglyph, which would be kind of weird. And that's definitely in Reanimator's range, although it's not common. Going into Game 2, much of what applied or was relevant in Game 1 is the same. Cody having the play means he can play a discard spell that can interact with a Graveyard Hate Piece, Nihil Spellbomb, and Deathrite and Voidwalker all costing mana. But Riley has access to a bunch of free interaction, a bunch of discard spells, and a bunch of Graveyard Hate. So I expect the game to play out pretty much the same. Although I would say Riley has gained enough equity that he's probably favored post-board. There's like Carpet and some other cards that are really backbreaking, but there's not that many. And Grixis is one of the few decks in the format that has a pretty critical mass of catch-alls. It has 2 forces, it has actual counterspell and Drown of the Lock and whatnot. I'd say Riley's probably 55 post-board. It's still very close. It's a very intricate matchup. Both players have the ability to throw and lose the matchup very, very easily. I really like how Riley played Game 1. He played it very carefully. didn't expose himself to just like losing the game for no reason. Like misstepping on a tutor that goes to the top kind of feels bad because it would be card disadvantage, but at the same time it did force a spell pierce out of Cody's hand, and it did then also force Cody to put an Atraxa into his hand. Going to mull to 5. It's pretty unfortunate. I mean, Reanimator can win with very few resources, but it is substantially harder to do in the face of exactly Grixis. Like, in the face of Disruption and Graveyard Hate and Stack Interaction, you really need all your cards. So I would say Riley's jumped to 65, maybe 70% now. I mean, Cody has a carpet and I think a frog. Definitely a frog. And it's going to be Snap Force a Willed. Riley pitching his own frog. I think I would prefer... Assuming Riley has any other blue cards, I think I would have kept the frog. He must be light on lands or something. But if your opponent mulls to 5 and you play a turn 2 Psychic Frog, you're so favored. Cody going to fire for Duress. It's going to be met by a Consider. Presumably because, yeah, Riley doesn't have another land. Okay, so if Consign was his only blue card and he needed to keep the Consider to make his second land drop, I think I would have forced pitching the Consign still. There was a draw step, so it's possible that Psychic Frog and Consider were the only blue cards and Riley didn't have a second land. It's a weird keep. I mean, I guess you have to keep if you're a forced blue card. And presumably Riley had the Duress. Might have been correct to mulligan from Riley's side. Cody pretty much hellbent, has carpet, is staring down pretty much nothing. Like, Riley can tap out for a Gurmag Angler here if he surveils whatever is on top into the graveyard. It's probably just heavily incentivized to do. But he has one unknown. Consign can hit something like Animate Dead. Yeah, I guess if you're trying to avoid getting nutted by Cody, then it makes sense to bin Psychic Frog to force. But I think this hand makeup is so bad that I would have kept the frog. I think players trying to work out Consign versus Carpet? Is that what's happening here? I guess so, right? Yeah, I guess they've called Mayo over because they're not sure if and how Carpet works with Consign. I guess if you announce that you're triggering Carpet and making mana, you can maybe consign that. Okay, sure. It is presumably a triggered ability and not a mana ability. I don't see how it would actually be relevant. I can't imagine you ever consign Carpet here. Unless you have like 4 islands in play for some reason, and you don't want Cody to be able to cast like a troll. Bind Drown and is casting Gurmag Angler. I think I would have kept Drown. If your game plan is to interact and trade resources and then, like, buy Lutri later, I guess if your hand is weak enough and you bin the Drown and just hope that Gomag Angler gets there, and you still have the Consign, which checks some of their animation spells. It doesn't check actual Reanimate or Exhume. I mean, Riley's pretty much stone cold to Entomb Reanimate, right? Consign can check some of the triggers, but it can't check just putting, like, a Valgavoth into play. If Cody puts an Archon into play, you have to counter that, but then it just triggers every turn until you're dead. So is MT gonna get, like, Entomb here? Does Cody think Riley's last card matters? It's gonna get Reanimate. Consign does not do that. It might just be Reanimate your frog. Okay. So notably, Psychic Frog is safe against Pyrogoyf because Riley ate his graveyard with Gomag Angler. Cody can shrink Pyrogoyf to a pretty decently small size here. Cody finds another Goyf and is playing it instead of Pyro. Sure. I think I would have preferred land by Lutri. I guess Riley is focusing on his bluff equity here, which is reasonable. And he's going to fire off Consign against the draw a card trigger? Okay, definitely should be casting Consign twice at least. Yeah, okay. I mean, I guess. I mean, Cody's hand is really light, and you're planning on just winning the game with Gomag Angler, so I guess this makes sense. Riley found a death right, but is not playing it. Pyrogoyf's gonna be... I mean, unless... I mean, Cody can just grow the Psychic Frog and keep it alive. Then he has no resources, and he can't jump the frog. Would he have been a VT? Could have VT'd Metamorphosis, let the frog die, and then brought it back. I think that would have been better, right? Because you would have kept some amount of cards in graveyard. Yeah, I think I would have just cast the VT, put Metamorphosis on top, and let the frog die to Pyrogoyf there. Because, like, how do you win? Are you chumping? You definitely have to bin Archon. You have 1 show and tell and 700 reanimation effects. You definitely pitch it. I don't know what Cody's life total is here. He might have been able to eat the Nether Goyf. Riley's pretty much face up. This is the turn. GG's. Riley wins 2-0 versus Cody. I think that's a pretty classic example. I think this was a really good showcase of the Grixis versus Reanimator matchups, where Grixis builds a house of cards to protect themselves, and it's really fragile. And Reanimator has the ability to win games by finding an avenue through everything, but if they don't, they're just dead. They just die to whatever is left over after the dust clears. They're stuck with a bunch of reanimation effects in hand and no creatures, or a bunch of creatures in graveyard and no effects. But I think really well played by both players. I think there are a couple of different spots where each of them could have gained a bit of equity. And I think letting the frog die... Yeah, I think letting the frog die to Pyroglyph, vetoing the Metamorphosis on top, playing it and bringing back the frog and giving it lifelink means you can actually potentially race. The Metamorphosis checks the Goyfs, so it's just the Angler hitting you. I think I would have preferred that. It was much more all-in than what Cody did, which is just keep the frog alive, but you can't jump it, which means you can't really attack. I don't know. Super close spot. Well played to both players, and this put Riley into the semi-finals. GG's. Hi everyone, Volty here. Today's video was brought to you with the lovely help of my patrons and donors, who you can see up here on screen. If you would like to financially support the content, there's links down below, and you can make sure that if you're able to and you want to help support the channel, that you can do so. You'll also get your name visible up here on screen as well, which is very cool. If you are watching this on YouTube, please consider subscribing. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the channel a ton. And if you're watching this on Twitch, please consider clicking that follow button as well. The bell will let you be notified of when streams are going live, but otherwise that's it from me. I'll catch you all next time.